Hello everybody and welcome to today's Sunday sermon, which is the 23rd Sunday in Ordinary Time. Today again we have from Jesus an extraordinary statement and very hard to understand it. And he says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Today, the theme is the human cost of being a disciple of Jesus. We must not take his words with cold and unimaginative literalness. Eastern language is always as vivid as the human mind can make it. When Jesus tells us to hate our nearest and dearest, he does not mean that literally. In other words, Jesus is saying true discipleship requires us to put him first. And I think it is fair to say that this is not easy. It's not about misery or about some incredibly dreadful price that one must pay to be Jesus' apprentice. The point is simply that unless we clearly see the superiority of what we receive as his disciples over every other thing that might be valued in this world, we cannot succeed in our discipleship to him. There will be times, however, when our burdens and yes, our cross will feel too overwhelming to bear. When we face that reality, we might conclude that being a disciple carries with it an impossible job description. The good news is that we struggle with our burdens and our cross. We learn, if we are open to our Lord, that we can't bear them by ourselves. And we become more willing to receive Jesus' assurance that we are not alone. He is with us. Jesus helps us to bear our loads, no matter how heavy. He assures us that his burden is easy and his yoke is light. When Jesus said this, he was on the road to Jerusalem. He knew that he was on the way to the cross, and the crowds who were with him thought that he was on his way to establish his empire. That is why he spoke to them like this. In the most vivid way possible, he told them that the man who followed him was not on the way to worldly power and glory, but must be ready for a loyalty which would sacrifice the dearest things in life, and for a suffering which would be like the agony of a man upon a cross. It is possible to be a follower of Christ without being a disciple, to be a camp follower without being a soldier of the King, to be a hanger-on in some great work without pulling one's weight. Jesus demands commitment, an unpopular word these days. We are tempted, in the interest of filling pews maybe in our church, not to challenge people to faithful stewardship of their lives, faithful worship attendance, and faithful sexuality, and honest business practices, and accurate tax returns, and compassion for the less fortunate, and other costly commitments. We hope perhaps that if we don't ask too much, congregations will return to the pews, churches will fill up. The irony is that the churches with high standards attract people with high standards. The Gospel writer today, Luke, is writing to a people who knows all about crosses. Persecution has begun, and Christians are actually dying on crosses. For the person desiring a casual discipleship, Jesus' words about cross-bearing could and would be very discouraging. But for Luke's church, experiencing persecution, these words would ratify their sacrifices and give it meaning. The tower which the man was going to build was probably a vineyard tower. Vineyards were often equipped with towers from which watch was kept against thieves who might steal the harvest. An unfinished building is always a humiliating thing. In every sphere of life, a person is called upon to count the cost. A man and a woman about to take these vows of marriage must count the cost about what they are about to do. When we decide to follow Christ, we know only that there will be a big price to pay. Jesus warns at the outset that the price will be high. President Gordon B. Hickey of the Mormon Church recalls the experience of a young man he knew in London who counted the cost required not only to enlist but to endure as a disciple of Jesus Christ. And he said, "I remember this boy coming to my apartment through the rain of the night. He knocked at the door. I invited him in. He said, 'I've got to talk with someone. I'm all alone.' And I said, 'What's your problem?' And he said, 'When I joined the church a little less than a year ago, my father told me to get out of his house and never come back. And I've never been back. And a few months later, the club of which I was a member banned me from being a member. And he said, last month my boss fired me because I was a member of this church. And I have been unable to get another job. And I had to go and look for social assistance. And last night, my girlfriend, whom I have known for over a year and a half, said she would never marry me because I was a Mormon. I said to the boy, 'If this has cost you so much, why don't you leave the church and go back to your father, to the club that you love, and to the job that meant so much to you, and to the girl you think you love?' He said nothing for what seemed to be a long time. Then, putting his head down in his hands, he cried. Finally, he looked up through his tears and said, 'I couldn't do that. I know this is true. And if it were to cost me my life, I could never give it up.' He picked up his wet cap and walked to the door and out into the rain, alone and trembling and fearful, but very resolute. Are you simply a person in the crowd who admires Jesus as a distant follower? Or are you a disciple who is willing to continue to learn from him and in the process be transformed into the image of one who offers you everything life can offer, including everlasting life? Think about it. Are we admirers or are we disciples? Which word describes your relationship with Jesus? His words and actions speak very clearly. You cannot be my disciple unless you put me first in your life. In the US today is National Wildlife Day. It encourages and improves awareness of the species around us and in the broader world. The National Day focuses on endangered species, preservation and conservation efforts around the world. May we do our best to love and protect the beautiful world that God has given us. May God bless you. Have a beautiful Sunday and a wonderful, grace-filled week ahead.